address those, but let's go ahead and get into the latest here in Metsland, shall we, everybody? So to begin tonight's conversation on the latest news and rumblings in Metsland, let's go ahead and see what has happened on the reported and rumor front over the past 24 hours. Now, as many of you guys have seen, I came out with a lengthy video that dropped this AM. Make sure to check it out whenever you guys get a chance. It honestly didn't hit the algorithm that well, and I really think it is because of the fact that, one, I've been pumping out so much content, and two, everyone's getting set now, trying to chill out a bit for the holidays, and it's been kind of quiet on the Mets front for the most part. So even though there was a lot that I broke down in that video, I may touch on some of those topics again in tonight's segment to make sure that you guys are in on the know in case you have missed anything to this point. But let's get away from these beautiful Cody Bellinger highlights. I have a lot more to say about him and his game as I have for a while, but let's get into various things in Mets land, starting with the following. Jeff McNeil, we saw, had his remarks shared now that he's no longer New York Met with the media today. And when speaking to one of the reporters here that you guys will see, Mr. Hernandez, he stated the following, and I quote, "I wouldn't want to go into details about that. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary. I loved everyone in that clubhouse." McNeil talking about his previous altercation with Francisco Lindor, because of course that was brought up in McNeil's first opening day presser, not opening day presser, I apologize, but his first actual, questioning now that he's officially a Sacramento A. So you know how we saw a reporter ask Jorge Polanco his thoughts on Alonso and Diaz leaving as his first remarks making now that he's a Met? Well, I think this comment was kind of similar in the sense that no reason to bring up such a thing, in my opinion, especially something that happened years ago. It wasn't even like McNeil was the one that was choking out Lindor. It was the other way around from how things were reported in that heated exchange going back to that game, and I believe May or April of 2021 against the Arizona Diamondbacks. I remember it like it was yesterday, but we have a lot more to say on this one regarding Jeff that you guys can see right there. I'm going to pull this up just if I in fact have it. If I don't, that's perfectly fine as well. But just for one last time, there are Jeff McNeil's numbers, his final numbers as a New York Met. And to expand more on these remarks regarding McNeil, we also have the following statements that he shared. Jeff McNeil, his initial reaction on the trade, and I quote, "I had a text from David Stearns going, 'Hey, please give me a call.' Jeff's reply was, I was like, I'm 100% going to get traded. I knew it was a possibility. I took that phone call. It was a quick phone call. I thanked him for everything, and he thanked me for everything. And that was that." And fittingly, and I joked about this only to say that's actually accurate, though, that in our live stream yesterday, reacting to McNeil being dealt, I did say how he's going to love going back to Cali as he's a West Coast native, one, but two, as someone who is going to have a lot of golf courses to thrive and take advantage of. And now fitting that at the time of McNeil getting the call, he was there on the golf course on the 14th hole. So there's just something so fitting about Jeff McNeil being traded while he's in peak golf mode, as he does 24/7 when he's not playing. Even when he is playing, he's out doing tournaments and stuff in season, which again, Mets fans have either loved or hated. No in between really on that front. But some other remarks that I want to share on McNeil's front with each and every one of you are the following, as you guys can see here. Jeff McNeil on the A's. I watched quite a bit of their games in New York. Just a super fun young team. Super excited to be a part of it. They have a great young core, and I just want to do my part to help them out. I think we're going to have a good squad. And to his credit, they do actually have a lot of really good foundational pieces. I mean, between having Kurtz at first base, obviously, when you have the stud in Shea Langeliers, who I absolutely love, at catcher, when you, of course, have, Tyler Soderstrom, even though he's not the most defensively sound, can bring playing to the bat for you. When you have Jacob Wilson there in that infield, there's a lot to like about the youth movement that's going on for the A's right now, and they have been in dire need of a veteran kind of profile at second base. And after seeing the Pirates trade for the former All-Star from the Rays and Brandon Lowe, the A's kind of had slim pickings as to what they deem best fit, especially for not wanting to give up more than really a 17-year-old IFA prospect. And that's essentially what they did in a salary dump, where they're eating around $10 million for McNeil's 2026 contract, and he has a club option after that season, and if the option is exercised, the Mets will pay a certain amount as part of that buyout. But shout out to my great friend and supporter on the platform that many of you guys know here at Isaac Rothman. Isaac, who has been our pitching guru on the platform in the past before he's now hit stardom, as Isaac is now doing a fantastic job working in player development for Coastal Carolina. I'm so proud of him, and I know that he's going to hopefully sooner than later get to the major league level. When he does, we'll be happy to say, remember Isaac when he was out here giving us nice little reports nightly on the key takeaways on how Mets Mets pitchers did going back to the 2023-2024 season. He's awesome. I was just texting him earlier today. I got to get back to him. But as we see, the Mets have acquired Yordan Rodriguez, and he had a sub-3 ERA that we saw last year. He struck out 20 batters in 8 games. These are his highlights down below. I would like to clarify something. I did misspeak in my live stream yesterday by stating that he was the 7th ranked IFA prospect in baseball, and our live stream to begin. And the only reason why I had that quote wrong, however, was because when I did my quick homework on him and I just looked up his rankings, his name popped up as Yordan Rodriguez, but what was in fine print after that was that it was stated it was Yandy Rodriguez, who's actually the prospect the Mets signed. That was a 7th ranked prospect from the IFA period in 2024 out of Venezuela. So I'd like to apologize for that. What I can inform you on is that Yordan Rodriguez was the 20th ranked DSL pitching prospect that we saw in the game this past year. He looked very good for his early sample size as a young pro ball player, only at the age of 17. So again, this is a long haul type pickup for the Mets, nothing that's going to immediately impact them. But Isaac states the following in regards to his game. Rodriguez touched 97 on his fastball. Mind you, as a 17-year-old, that's really good, and has a nasty slider with some sweep. He's an athletic 17-year-old with a wide frame and average command for his age. Hard to project at his age, and he needs to develop more before we see shapes consistent to accurately evaluate him. So a nice little breakdown there on not Giovanni, but Yordan for anyone that is interested. And last but not least, Jeff McNeil. Final thing I'll say on Jeff, again, as someone who I greatly had the privilege of being a part of Jeff McNeil's charity event. I don't know if I've told you guys this story to all of you. I know I've told some of you guys this before, but just to reiterate my final comments regarding Jeff here, because I posted this on X this past day. Let me just scroll down to find it, everybody. Here's Jeff and I from 2023. Jeff was gracious enough for him and his team to invite me to his charity event, which fittingly was at a Lake Topgolf there in Long Island, which is, again, very, very on par for Jeff McNeil as part of a charity event. And that was the first ever event I had ever been invited to as a Mets fan / talking head in this space. And to have McNeil, who I was honestly a little taken back by, to invite me, him and his team, when, you know, my biggest video on the platform at the time was talking about 5 Mets who won't return for that upcoming season. And Jeff McNeil was on the thumbnail because I really thought that the Mets were going to be parting ways with him after what was a putrid 2021-ish season or so. And then, of course, he dominated in 2022, the batting champ Kane. And then we see in 2023, didn't have his best season either. And then it kind of just unraveled from there until he started pick things up a bit this past season, going more gap to gap instead of being that slap hitter. But I just want to say once more to Jeff McNeil and his entire family, thank you so much for the hospitality. I greatly appreciate it. I'm wishing him and his family all the best there in Sacramento for at least the 2026 season, whatever his future is going to hold as a player. But enough of me talking about Jeff McNeil here. Let's go on and now break down all the other topics here in Metsland for each and every one of you. Again, if you guys haven't already, make sure to hit that like and subscribe on your way, and I really appreciate that. And James, while I am most certainly a short person, Jeff is also a much bigger guy in person than I could have fathomed. He's well over 6 foot, that I know, but just unbelievably broad. Like, colored me shocked. In great shape. It's almost like he's a professional baseball player. Who would have thought, right? But again, it was really, really cool to meet him. And that was also a time in my life on a personal level. I was going through a lot in that summer of 2023. So I really did appreciate getting that moment, especially more than anything else. McNeil's 5'5". That's hilarious. But now let's go on. Let me just switch this real quick, everybody. Let's go here. Bang, bang, boom. Let's get on to these other topics. And again, if you guys have specific comments that you'd like me to answer later on in this one, let me know here in this one. And thank you guys kindly for that. Because the next topic that I'd like to get into now, everybody, is briefly, let's touch on Mr. Ken Rosenthal stating the following regarding Ketel Marte here that we see with foul territory. And he states the following today, that the Diamondbacks likely won't trade Ketel Marte unless they receive young pitching in return, says Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic and foul territory. That said, they seem motivated to move him because of his looming 10-5 rights. So either way, Ketel Marte feels like someone that is going to be traded more by the passing second this offseason. And when you look at this remark here from Ken Rosenthal, you know, what does it reaffirm? If the Mets are truly in the market for Ketel Marte, as Francis Romero stated that they were as of yesterday after trading McNeil, and again, we're still trying to figure out what would be the best fit for him, obviously positionally for for this organization. I talked more about that in our video that we dropped this past AM. So again, check that out if you guys have not done so already after watching this one. But what is the organization that has more assets to give and has a deeper farm in baseball than any other club in the game currently for young top pitching prospects? Step right up and meet the New York Mets. Now, the Boston Red Sox, of course, are a very attractive club as an option as well. They have a lot of guys that are right on the rise, right on the cusp of getting to the major league level, but so are the Mets. And universally deemed through ESPN especially, the Mets were deemed for not only having the best farm in baseball, but they are undoubtedly the best farm when looking at pitching depth. And that is where, as I've told you guys over the past day or so, that the Mets do a trade with Ketel Marte, you can fully expect one of the Mets' more coveted pitching prospects to be part of that deal. Because yes, Ketel Marte still has north of 6 years left on his contract for a guy who's entering his age 33 season. So it's hard to envision how if the Mets really took on the entirety of that contract, that they would still have to give up that asset. But you have to realize Ketel Marte is a hot commodity. He's the best hitting second baseman in Major League Baseball currently, and has versatility to play outside of second base and do it at least at a rate that you're not losing sleep over in ways that you felt that you lost sleep anytime that Mark Vientos tried to handle a ball at third base. So Ketel Marte, we all know the obvious great offensive upside that he brings, but in a trade where if you are, say, eating a good chunk of the contract, but maybe not entirely, the Diamondbacks could maybe say, you know what, we'll actually eat a portion of this deal to help make sure that we can maximize the trade value, which would make more sense, again, if the Mets traded a Brandon Sproat, Christian Scott type, because I wouldn't want to see Jonathan in a deal for Ketel Marte, truthfully, but I also understand that you have to give to get. I'm not entirely sure how much of an appetite David Stearns would have for someone like him to give up these assets. You could also make the argument that, okay, if the Diamondbacks are so willing to trade Ketel Marte, why wouldn't the Mets just say, let's have Jet Williams frontline this trade? Because Jet Williams is going to be further blocked in the organization. He's not going to really have room in the outfield to play because the Mets are going to allocate, they're going to properly land guys for the outfield this offseason, among others. So it really just does feel like that Jet Williams would be a feasible fit for the Diamondbacks as essentially a plug-in place. If they got rid of Ketel Marte, and Jet could go right away in your middle infield seamlessly without an issue and just see if he's going to thrive there. So as much as I love Jet Williams, you don't lose sleep about trading someone like Jet Williams for the immediate impact that Ketel Marte brings for this team for at minimum the next 2, 3, hopefully, God willing, 4 seasons, knowing that he's locked down until 2031. Again, it's a very good average annual value of a contract, but what it is not good on is length. And the length is why the AAV is good, because they really spread it thin over those years. So for the Mets, if they really are in the market for Ketel Marte, you have to buckle up and realize they're going to more than likely have to give up some quality pitching talent in the process. The good news, however, is that even in a role where they say traded one of their more coveted pitching prospects, let's say they could get Jonathan out of the equation and talk more on a Christian Scott or a Brandon Sproat, guys that are very much, I think, more MLB ready than Ton currently, and are expected to impact the Mets to varying degrees in the rotation next season. The Diamondbacks are looking for controllable arms with high upside, obviously guys on pre-arb that you don't have to worry about them anytime soon on paydays, and that is where I think it's a logical fit if the Mets really circle to trade around one of those talents without having to give up as many assets around them. How much would you have to give up for Ketel Marte? The jury's still out, but what we do know is that, again, this is the kind of market that is shaping up for Ketel Marte and his services, and I see both the pros and the cons and wanting to go after someone like him. Rosenthal said the Diamondbacks want Albies and Waldrop from the Braves, and Atlanta will move any young pitchers at this moment, but things could change if they sign a pitcher. I'm telling you right now, if the Atlanta Braves trade and land for Ketel Marte, that's going to be a really bad look by the Mets here, because even though we have Marcus Semien, it's never a good look if you're allowing these top talents to land the National League East, to land with a rival club when that player still could have been viable and valuable for you. Because I get it, Ketel Marte is not the most logical fit because you have Marcus Semien, but again, you get creative here. His bat is so good and so proficient and so significant that you are fooling yourself if you're not at least somewhat involved in that market. We know the Mets are involved, but to what degree? Again, your guess right now is as good as mine. Only time will tell on that front, and it wouldn't shock me if this is yet again another circumstance where you just find out that, hey, the Mets were in the market, but they never really took it seriously because they don't need him. But I think you could rightfully say that if there is a way to move on from Pete Alonso and have both offensive and defensive value, this is a way to get unbelievably creative while getting a player that brings more immediate value. Again, Alonso was just over a 3 WAR player this past year. Ketel Marte was just under a 5 WAR. And Marte had a better WRC plus than Alonso this past season too. You don't need to have north of 40 home runs to have the amount of overall offensive success that a guy like Ketel Marte can bring you, and comparing or contrasting with Alonso. I know Alonso's RBIs were almost double Ketel's last year because didn't he have like 130 or so? Had a great year for Alonso, all things considered, on the offensive end. But even then, the New York Mets still felt inclined that they didn't want to lock him down and bring him back. So what does that tell you? For right or wrong reason, he is not going to be part of that future, and that's evident in them not even giving him an actual offer. So now going on from Ketel Marte, everybody, I'd love to know your continued thoughts about him. Let's get on to our next topic in this one, and let's talk a bit more here on what we see. And this is courtesy of Fireside Yanks, but they're just reaffirming what Jack Curry of Yes Network stated on the topic of one Cody Bellinger. And regarding Cody Bellinger, we see the following, everybody. Jack Curry says the Yanks are in a wait-and-see mode, with Cody Bellinger not feeling overly optimistic or pessimistic either way, just neutral at the most part. He also notes the Yankees are not waiting on Tucker to sign to make an agreement with Bellinger. I don't exactly know how truthful that is. I guess, again, wait and see. We'll see what's actually more accurate than anything else. But Cody Bellinger, as we have talked about all offseason long, makes just so much sense for this New York Mets team that if he does not land with the Mets, I think there's only one or two truly feasible outcomes. A, he returns to the New York Yankees because the Yanks have to make sure they don't let another coveted talent hit the free agent market and go to the New York Mets. Or B, the LA Dodgers scoop up Cody Bellinger. And that's actually something that I predicted in my free agency predictions video for my WardyNYM YouTube channel that you guys can check out. I also did a video on what the F is going on with the New York Mets, so you guys can see more of a deep dive on that should you have interest. But if Bellinger doesn't go back to LA or doesn't go back to the Bronx, I think the New York Mets are obviously the destination for him. When you have a batter that's so elite defensively in various aspects of his game, from left to center to right and in first base, I mean, that just opens the floodgates for how creative the Mets can continue to be with their lineup configuration. I think the Mets would love a world right now, David Strings especially, where they add multiple players that are viable options to play more than one position. Might not be elite in every position, but will bring that versatility, especially after losing McNeil. There's definitely more interest and need and value in getting guys that bring positional versatility than ever before, because Jorge Polanco is still a guy that's going to probably get more reps at DH and first base than anywhere else in 2026. That's been reaffirmed constantly. But Bellinger here, you don't not only see the respectable offensive numbers, who has a fantastic guy at the plate, but you see the tremendous defensive numbers here. 93rd in outs above average, 91st in arm value, 83rd in arm strength. That's why Bellinger was a more valuable player than Alonso last year, roughly a 5 WAR. And he wasn't as good of a hitter at a 25 WRC plus with 25% above league average, but still respectable numbers for a Cody Bellinger, who of course will fluctuate with his home and road splits, knows what it takes to win, has performed really well in New York, is a guy that obviously has been an MVP caliber player in the past, has handled big markets from LA, winning a championship there, going to the Cubs and having playing success, now being in the Bronx in a one and done year and a contract year and thriving there for half the season, taking advantage of the short porch a bit. He's a guy that I know is going to bode well wherever he lands, and it will only come down to years for someone like Bellinger. So my guess is that if Cody Bellinger was going to go back to the New York Yankees, it would have happened by now. But again, we're all kind of thinking that Bellinger is a shoo-in for the New York Mets and David Stearns as a fit, when in reality, the Mets may actually, in the end, never go beyond like a 4-year deal for Cody Bellinger. And us hyping him up all this time reaches a moot point when we find out that they never even gave him a really competitive offer beyond those years, when maybe he gets 5 or 6 at minimum. So to be determined what happens to Cody Bellinger, but I would love to hear from you Mets fans in the comments down below. Are you for or against going after Cody Bellinger for all the great versatility he provides, and obviously someone who can still be a plus bat for you for at least the next couple years, and you worry about the latter half of that contract the same way that you worry about Nimmo when it is deemed worthy to finally worry about it? If the Mets can get out of Nimmo's 5 years by trading him away, I'm inclined to believe that they could get out of the final, say, 2 or 3 years of Bellinger if they have a similar hiccup where maybe the defense completely falls off a cliff, maybe the bat becomes just normally league average or just below league average. Again, things we worry about once we get there. But Cody Bellinger, definitely going to continue to have discourse regarding him because we know a lot of Mets fans want him, and the Mets have steadily been in that market for quite some time now. Now, to stay on the topic of the New York Yankees, let's get on to another topic here from Jack Curry of Yes Network, stating the following. The vibe that Jack Curry is getting with the Yankees and Tatsuya Imai is that the connection, and I quote, does not exist. So you guys know how on the platform I told each and every one of you going back just a couple days ago that the Yankees likely weren't landing Imai. It wasn't looking optimistic on that front. Well, it's been reaffirmed and doubled down by Jack Curry. It ain't happening. So step right up and meet the Yankees yet again, a team that looked like that they were poised to go after heavy hitters and the MPB market. A lot of reporting was stating heading in the offseason that they were going to have an adamancy to finally dabble back in there. They've been frustrated by losing to teams like the Dodgers, like the Mets, like the Cubs, and others in years past when they really don't have anything to show on recent talents from the MPB, etc., other than a guy like Masahiro Tanaka. He's the first guy that comes to mind, and that was a while ago now. So the Yankees have really been behind the 8 ball and trying to bring in these talents from Japan, and it's easier said than done now, especially when everyone and their mother wants to be a Dodger. But Imai has been on record multiple times this offseason saying that he does not want to be an LA Dodger. He wants to beat a team like the LA Dodgers. So Tatsuya Imai, right, you can check off the Yankees as a fit. They are officially off the board, and Imai again is expected to start to meet with clubs, if he hasn't already, over the next calendar week, as he's going to check out their facilities, check out their cities a bit, and then go on from there. So Imai, of course, doesn't have too much more time in his posting window, but still does have some time to negotiate with clubs, and I'd anticipate that his market is really going to pick up once we either get after Christmas, either before the new year or just after the new year. Pretty much, I think we might not see much with him really until the final 48 hours of his posting window being there for his team in the MPB that officially posted him. So Imai, I'm not going to go on a massive tangent as to what is so good about him. You guys know how I feel about Tatsuya Imai if you've been following the platform, but I'll just give you a quick summary for those who have not paid attention. Tatsuya Imai, what separates himself from every other talent in the free agent market currently, including that being someone like Framber Valdez, is the fact that while Imai doesn't necessarily have truly ace stuff, he has the makings of someone who very well could turn out to be an ace caliber pitcher for a team like the New York Mets or any team that has the luxury of landing his services, because Imai is rightfully so finally getting to the point of peaking in his career in a very exciting way. Like, he's just hitting the tip of the iceberg for him and what he can do as a pitcher. He touched 100 miles per hour for the first time in his career that we saw this year there in the MPB. He sat steadily 96, 97 plus on the gun, touching 100 plus, has a nasty arsenal that we've seen, a sub-2 ERA, a gorgeous K to walk ratio of almost a 10 K per 9 to a 2.5 walks per 9, and a home run rate that was fantastic. Imai's only entering his age 28 season. So what is separating himself from these other starters is that he has a lot of upside, and the upside can very well be as good as a number 1B or 2 in your rotation. And I think the floor for someone like Imai is like a 4 in your rotation. So either way, you're getting a really quality piece here. Might not, of course, have the same level of impact as a dominant Yoshinobu Yamamoto, but that's a really high bar and tall task to set when Yamamoto's already one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball. So Tatsuya Imai, we'll see what his market will shape up to be. There's a lot of uncertainty as to how many years he's going to find himself getting. I would love to land someone like him, but a lot of people are under the belief that Imai may very well land of a contract at least 6 or 7 years or more. And for the New York Mets, does that fit their short and long-term bill? On the age, it most certainly does, but is the talent enough of a profile to warrant the Mets making such a signing, or the Mets stubbornly not going to do any long-term signing for a starter, with the exception of maybe Framber Valdez, more short-term high AAV, let's say 30+ mil AAV on a 4-year contract with at best a 5th-year option? It's abundantly clear the Mets are gearing up to do their bigger spending next offseason, okay? And it's really interesting to evaluate that, knowing that there's going to be the pending CBA, a likely lockout, and we don't exactly know how much teams will be able to spend versus how they have the past couple years, even with the Steve Cohen tax. There's so much uncertainty there. But knowing how deep the starter market is for guys that will inevitably be hitting the free agent market next offseason is why we shouldn't expect the Mets to go out of their way to really land any starter, with maybe the exception of Valdez, maybe Imai at absolute best, but I really think it's going to be slim pickings otherwise. Everyone else I think we're going to see in this regard is going to be guys that are going to be more involved in the trade market, because again, what is currently out there in the free agent market, not a lot of guys are really going to justify going out of their way to want to spend big on. Imai, I think, is an exception. Valdez, an exception on 4 years, let's say 30 million AV, but to be determined if they're actually going to go out of their way to do such a thing or not. So let me know, guys, again, Tatsuya Imai, if you guys are for or against the coveted Japanese right-hander getting set to hit the bigs. We got a couple more topics I want to hit on, and then we'll continue on the live show, but we will cut things off for replay viewers in this one, so continue to smash that like and subscribe on. Help us get to 350 likes to our 800 live viewers. I really appreciate that, and thank you guys kindly again for being in here. It really does mean a lot. Going on from Tatsuya Imai, everybody. We got more topics that we need to hit on in this one. Another topic that we're going to get into is the following. Let's go ahead and check it out. As you guys can see here, sources, the Mets have signed right-hander Ofridi Gomez to a minor league deal. Of course, there wouldn't be a day in Mets land without David Stern signing pitchers to minor league contracts with potentially spring training invites. But I will just say that even though this is a minor league deal, clearly an arm that might F around and have upside for the Mets and their bullpen next year. Because we know that every single year, not just the Mets, but any other good team in baseball will have guys that they pull out of thin air that was looking good in the farm, come up because DFAs happen, of course inconsistencies happen, injuries happen. The entire bullpen could be in shambles in the first 2 months because you never know in baseball, obviously. But this is an interesting move considering the 30-year-old has pitched well in the Dominican Winter League with a 2.77 ERA. Granted, Dominican Winter League literally means nothing. It is pales in comparison to even like AAA, for example. 22 strikeouts in 13 innings, but his fastball is up to 99, so he's throwing gas. It's all just going to come down to command, and if he's someone that the Mets are at all going to give a look, say spring training come around. So maybe even as a non-roster invite is what I think may happen in the case of him. So to be determined on that front. But as we continue on from here, we also have another move, and that is the following. The Mets have signed Tyler Birch to a 2-year minor league deal. Birch pitched in 114 games in 5 seasons in minor league baseball, posting a 3.7 ERA. Birch was selected in the 2024 Rule 5 draft, but missed last season due to elbow surgery. He's expected to pitch in 2026. So the Mets gave him a multi-year deal so that way he can continue to rehab in the organization and someone that they can get further looks on beyond the 2026 year. I'm curious what the Mets see in Birch because obviously at minimum, this is a guy that will just be impacting your minor leagues, and that's about that. But if you're going to go out your way to give a 2-year commitment to a player that's currently still going through ailment when he's still more of a minor league profile than anything else, something tells me that the Mets see his pitch profile and think that they can fine-tune something about his game to maybe maximize and get more out of and develop it into something of substance at all once he gets fully healthy, either through 2026 or then as we get into 2027. But I'm not here to talk about someone like Tyler Birch nearly as much as I'm here to talk about the following. Let's go ahead and pull this up for you guys to check out here. This was the news that took Mets fans by storm today. Mets have discussed Austin Hayes internally and have some interest. Had a very nice year in Cincy, a 768 OPS, the righty hitting outfielders among potential fits. Now, I'm going to say some things, and I do not mean this at all as a slight to Jon Heyman. John deserves a lot of credit. Listen, love him or hate him, he broke the Juan Soto news last offseason. So for that reason alone, Heyman will always have a soft spot in my heart, and I don't just say that as someone who is a New York Post contributor, as I know he works with the Post. I may very well be doing more things with him in the future, but I say this more so as just someone who understands kind of how the industry works and all the information that John has relayed. And some things are going to hit and other things are not going to hit. What has not hit for Jon Heyman and a lot of reporters in Metsland this offseason has been breaking down players and saying the Mets are connected and then the Mets don't land them. Now, obviously, Mets being connected to players and actually physically landing them are two entirely different things. And that's why I tell you guys all the time, of course, we will talk about every rumor, every report, you name it all off season long, but it does not change the fact, obviously, that it doesn't mean it's going to come to fruition. The Mets are going to be involved in endless markets, and that is about that. But as we see here from Heyman discussing Austin Hayes, while John has not technically reported anything this offseason of the Mets being connected to a player that actually ultimately came to fruition on the news for the most part, what is true is that Austin Hayes did have a solid year for the Reds last season. Here's why I want little to nothing to do with Austin Hayes unless the Mets solely brought him in as a fourth outfielder type that platoon time with Carson Bench to begin Carson Bench's career. That's the only way I think you could somewhat justify this, is if you brought in Hayes for a guy who wouldn't be playing every day, solely facing left-handed pitching because he did very well against left-handed pitching, had a WRC plus of over 20% above league average. Against lefties, I think actually around north of 30%, if I'm not mistaken. That's good. But here's the facts about Austin Hayes, okay? Like many other guys that you may see the Mets connected to, Austin falls in the category of someone that is a little bit of a defensive liability. Nothing overly crazy. But again, not a huge problem. He's right around league average that we saw this past year in defense through OAA. Has very good arm strength, so that is good. He would already be an upgrade over Nimmo because the bar is so low there. The offensive metrics leave a lot to be desired, and this is just simply why I don't want much to do with Austin Hayes, because I don't really see a world where the Mets would bring in someone like Hayes to be a fourth outfielder for them. I feel like if they brought someone like him in, it would be for the sake of to actually have him get fairly consistent reps, and I don't want that, obviously. So this feels like a connection just for the sake of having a connection to weigh all options. If it happens, it happens. I'll worry about it then, but in the meantime, let's break down the immediate pros and cons with Austin Hayes. Pros with Austin Hayes. He has been a pretty solid and steady corner outfield bat that we've seen for the past couple years, right? He, of course, had success to a certain degree with the Baltimore Orioles, got traded to the Philadelphia Phillies a couple years ago, did nothing for them because he unfortunately went down with ailment for like the entire second half of that season, and he was just a non-factor for them. So he was properly cut, and then he signed in the batter's box with the Reds this past year, and even while being on the Reds, a park that he should be thriving offensively in, he still couldn't even get to an 800 OPS. He had an on-base of just 315, a 266 average, a 453 slug, 15 home runs, 7 stolen bags, and 60 runs scored. You know what? Like, truthfully, the fact that he did not even take advantage of being in that batter's box for half the season, albeit only in 380 at-bats, you know, I'm not exactly sure how to feel. But maybe as I'm reading this more, knowing that he only had 380 at-bats and 416 plate appearances, that would make more sense. Like if the Mets brought in Austin Hayes to essentially be the Starling Marte replacement as a fourth outfielder, but someone that could actually handle the outfield, then that's okay. You know, like then I'm content with it, especially if you're going to have him solely come in to face left-handed pitching. That's where I think there's levels of justification for this. Otherwise, I really don't see the fit because, again, I want the Mets to be shooting greater for their outfield. And maybe I'm going to get my hopes up. Wouldn't shock me. It happens every single offseason. But knowing that there's still guys like Bellinger, to a higher degree Tucker, and unique fits for the trade options, including guys like Jarren Duran, Wilyer Abreu, and the laundry list goes on and on and on from there. I'm really just curious to see if anything materializes from this kind of report or if the Mets, just showed a level of internal interest, and that's about that. So let me know, guys, are you for or against someone like Austin Hayes? Again, I don't hate him if he's your fourth outfield type, essentially. If he's like kind of more of your Tyrone Taylor replacement, Starling Marte replacement, I think that's feasible. I don't have an issue with that at all. I see Austin Hayes as I see a Mark Canha, and if he can handle a limited sample size off the bench, getting some reps in the corner outfield, especially if maybe Carson Edge doesn't fully blossom right away. And if you do sign Bellinger, you of course can have Hayes get times in the outfield for the times that Belly's at first and say Polanco's at DH if you want to go down that route. So there are creative ways to go about this, but again, I'm really trying to justify something that I personally do not want to see happen. So I'm not going to try to spin this and be like, oh yeah, this would be a fantastic pickup for the Mets. I only like it in a very specific circumstance. Otherwise, I really don't have much of a love or infatuation with this coming to fruition. Let me know, guys, your thoughts on Austin Hayes right there. But beyond Austin Hayes, everybody, we do have more that we can break down in this one, and it states the following. Let's go ahead and do exactly that. Let me just go up here for a second. Let's see here. Oh, I'm on John Heyman's profile. That's why I'm like, this doesn't look exactly how I need to look here. So my apologies for that one. Let me go back here for a second. Bang, bang, boom. I know I got donations that I will get to in a second. Thank you guys kindly for that. I really do appreciate it. I will get to them literally in just a second once I cut things off for our replay viewers in a minute. I'm just making sure that there's no other immediate topic that I need to touch on that I would say was new news. Okay, we touched on all of them. Fantastic. So the final thing that I will touch on before I cut things off for our replay viewers today will be the following. And that is the fact that, as we know, again, the Mets have been connected to a laundry list of players. But one player, actually two players, is what we're going to quickly highlight here, that I really just do think makes so much sense, again, is because we saw the reporting from this past day that the Mets are in the market for a righty bat, and especially one who can handle first base. Now, as I said in my video this morning, why did the Mets not just trade for Wilson Contreras? Unfortunately, Chaim Bloom was mostly to blame. Chaim Bloom, who was the former GM for the Red Sox, famously known for trading Mookie Betts to help out ownership that didn't want to spend on Mookie Betts. He was really just the guy that took the heat for it when it was an ownership decision down. He did a fantastic job building the Red Sox farm, and a lot of them are now blossoming. And there's a reason why the Red Sox have made prominent trades solely with the Cardinals this offseason. From Sonny Gray to Wilson Contreras to now being in trade talks for Brendan Donovan. The reason for this is because Chaim Bloom is now in the Cardinals organization, their front office, and he's prying away a lot of these guys that he drafted and helped develop, and he knows have a lot of upside and can see a little greater value in them than maybe other organizations will. So that Cardinals-Red Sox tie will continue to be the case probably from Breslow to bloom. So now that Contreras is off the board, let's talk about two guys that make so much sense for the Mets. And one of them, again, I will continue to beat this drum until hopefully it happens, and that's Yandy Diaz. Yandy Diaz is a dog. Yandy is a guy that I just think makes so much sense for this team. I understand that Yandy isn't the most defensively sound player, but the Mets, I think, are throwing defensively sound out the door by having Jorge Polanco on their team and planning to give him a solid amount of reps at first base for a guy that technically doesn't have any MLB reps at the major league level at first base. He practiced for a good amount this past year that we saw before games, but practicing doing pregame infield work versus in-game decisions are two entirely different feels. So when I see Yandy Diaz as a fit, I love everything about it. Again, he's a guy that'll split time, first base DH with someone like Polanco, entering his age 35 season, but it doesn't matter. Diaz has been so steady in his career, a tremendous bat that not only provides power of 20 to 30 home runs a year, but also hits for tremendous high contact and gets on base at a great rate. Now, like anything else, with batters coming from small markets, how do they handle a big market like New York, A, and B, how do they also transition from going from a small market, a batter's box there where he played in essentially a spring training facility all year long because of the Rays not being able to play at the Trop this past year due to the hurricane that happened over a year ago and tearing up their dome. Yandy, though, has been unbelievably steady with his offensive production. Not only does he have tremendous numbers that you guys see beside me there, like fan-effing-tastic, one of the best first baseman in baseball when looking at the bat first mentality. We see 79 runs scored, 25 home runs, 83 RBIs, 3 stolen bags, a 300 average, a 366 on base, a 482 slug, a 3 WAR, and a 135 on the WRC+. So again, we're looking at a player that's eerily similar in value to Pete Alonso is of course not going to hit for the same power as someone like Alonso, but Yandy, I think, checks off more boxes than most. If you're looking for a righty bat in this market, and it did state in Salmon's article with Ken Rosenthal over the past day that a trade would be more likely to find this fit as someone who could basically be a proper upgrade over Mark Vientos currently being that guy than what they have available in the free agent market. And I'm not at all saying that the Mets are for sure not going to land someone in the free agent market here, but it very well could be a greater likelihood that's via trade because Salmon wouldn't just go out of his way to state that for the sake of saying it. So Yandy Diaz, a Rays team that of course has traded Shane Baz, traded their veteran star second baseman, former All-Star, and Brandon Lowe. They may very well trade Yandy Diaz, who's pretty much on the final year of his contract with a club option. Of course, if you opt into that, then you have him for 2027, but only a couple years left on his deal. Very respectable AAV that the Mets would handle without a problem. And if the Mets went into next season with a platoon of Yandy Diaz and Jorge Polanco at first base DH, I think I would really love that if I'm being transparent. If I'm being so honest with you, a great reality is if they brought in Cody Bellinger, they had Belly get a good amount of reps in the outfield, and then he got occasionally at first base. And for the time he had occasionally at first base, you say had Polanco maybe get a rep at third, or then you have Yandy at DH, or one of them maybe comes off the bench for a game. Like, you just get creative with it is the point. And I do think that if you landed Yandy, there would be maybe a lesser likelihood of landing Bellinger. I could be wrong. I think Bellinger's greatest value is not only his defense, but his defensive versatility especially. But if I'm being transparent, I said this yesterday and I'll say it again. If you gave me Yandy Diaz and Jorge Polanco as the Mets' first base DH platoon in 2026 instead of Pete Alonso and Starling Marte running it back, I would be transparent by saying that I prefer that, genuinely. That's more immediate value night and day over running it back with Starling Marte and Pete Alonso again. And we know that as great as Alonso is and as valuable as Marte is, more so with his relationship with Soto and batting 280 in his sleep, well, that's all great stuff. But the Mets have not gone anywhere with that core of players. So, and not only having new faces, but guys who have done very well steadily in their career, I don't think it's a bad thing at all. Again, the Mets have had no steady consistency from their DH position at all. If the Mets had DH of Yandy Diaz and Jorge Polanco above all next season, how could that not perform well? Like, seriously, I really think that duo would be fantastic if it came to fruition. Of course, you're sacrificing defense, but I think the Mets are more willing to sacrifice the level of defense at first because Yandy still is not as much of a liability as Alonso, and you're more than likely going to have a greater looking infield around him from having Simeon being a stud at second base, barring if you get someone like Ketel Marte to mix things up a bit, Lindor at short, obviously, and Brett Beatty at the hot corner, unless you, again, acquire someone that brings more to the table there for you than that. What is Stearns doing with Vientos? More than likely trading him. Otherwise, I think the Mets would have committed to him by now. So I think if the Mets can find someone as a suitor for Vientos in the right deal, they're going to go down that route and do it. I'm not saying that they should trade Vientos. I'm just saying the writing's been on the wall for a while now. They're not committing to him, and there's an obvious reason for that. And it's headlined by the fact that, like Alonso, Vientos has literally no defensive value. Like, so much so that it even makes Yandy Diaz, who's not a great defender at first base, look like a great defender at first base. So now going on from Yandy Diaz, the other player that I want to touch on before I cut things off for my replay viewers here is, yes, Mr. Kosuke Okamoto. And guys, we have a big discussion with Kosuke Okamoto. And the main reason why we have a bigger discussion with him today is because of this. I don't know if you guys saw it, so let me enlighten you. And thank you guys again so much for the donations. I will get to them all here very soon. I pinky promise. I just want to rapid fire and touch on these topics first so make sure that I'm in a flow here. As you guys can see, and shout out to my guy, Brandon London. I did my latest segment with the New York Post today. You guys can check it out. I broke down a bit on, who's the leader moving forward for the organization between Soto and Lindor, who has more pressure on their shoulders. What can the Mets do now, as they have a lot more moves to do this offseason, and a bit more on Mets-related topics. So check that entire segment out on the New York Post Sports YouTube channel, and I have it pinned on the community tab on YouTube for you guys to check out as well. That's just a short they posted on socials earlier. Look at me, my big head. All right, now, as you guys can see, shout out my amazing editor, Jacob, for chefing this one up. The Pirates have signed Ryan O'Hearn to a 2-year, $29 million contract. Now, I told you guys right after Jorge Polanco signed with the Mets that it wouldn't shock me if the Mets landed like a Ryan O'Hearn type to kind of be more that defensively minded first baseman, a guy who had a nice breakout year for the Orioles, but then fell off a cliff when he landed with the Padres. O'Hearn does not strike me as a guy that will be able to handle big markets anytime soon. I think him going to the Pirates is a prime example of exactly that. 2 years, $29 million. Before Mets fans get their what's in twist saying, oh my God, why didn't the Mets do this? He feels like a profile that is not going to handle the big market well. And I could be wrong in saying that if O'Hearn gets traded to a big market at the deadline and thrives, but we don't really know. So in the meantime, O'Hearn is off the market. But why is this a good news for the New York Mets and Kosuke Okamoto if they are at all in the market? Well, the good news is the Pirates were deemed as one of the best fits for Kosuke Okamoto pretty steadily this offseason. They've been long connected to him. The Pirates have been looking to, of course, upgrade their infield. And to their credit, they have. Between landing guys like Ryan O'Hearn and Brandon Lowe, that Pirates team actually looks somewhat respectable now heading into next season. So we'll see if they do more splashes than that, obviously. But, you actually look at the Pirates and you say, oh, they actually have some players now. Like, they actually have some guys that you say actually have some credibility to their name. Good for them. But now that the Pirates are essentially out on Okamoto, unless they would say bring him in to be their third baseman, which they could still do, obviously, Okamoto feels like that he's not going to land there. He still could land in the NL Central with a different team. He still could land with a small market club. But if the Mets are at all involved in this man's market, by God, he just makes a lot of sense, guys. One, Okamoto is not going to cost you an absurd amount of money. Two, he is a greater floor of a player than Munetaka Murakami, which is why Okamoto may get a better contract in the end. And three, or C, whichever way I was doing the ranking there, Okamoto is a superior defender. Like, this is a guy whose floor defensively is a guy who should be better than Brett Baty at third base. Should be night and day from what we've seen for the past number of years. Let's see. I'm hoping we land him just so Wardy will start pronouncing his name correctly. Am I not saying his name right? Kosuke Okamoto. Is it Kosuke Okamoto? What? How am I saying it wrong? Let me know. Let me know, Zach. What am I doing wrong here? I feel like I'm close to being on the nose, if not entirely on the nose there. Okamoto has essentially long O. So Kosuke Okamoto? Like that? Okamoto. Is it like that? Okamoto. Kosuke Okamoto. Okay. Oak. I'll go with Oak. Thank you. I appreciate it. Potato. Okamoto. Kosuke, okay, so emphasis on the O. I heard you. Thank you. Appreciate that. You guys are cracking me up. Thank you. Okay, Okamoto, potato. I'm just gonna call him O. We're gonna go with O now because I can't handle this. What you need to know about O has been essentially a 6-time Gold Glove version of that in Japan at the hot corner, and has looked very good at first base. He's unbelievably versatile and can handle third base, first base without a problem. That versatility is key. The Mets are in need of a righty bat for the lineup. They're in need of a guy who can handle first base reps. Okamoto would be a more defensively sound first base option. You could platoon him with Polanco, and you could also play him at third base in ways that you want. So if you want to get creative with Beatty, or maybe if Beatty had a really bad stretch and you didn't want him playing every day, you could shift Okamoto to third, have maybe platooning Bellinger and Jorge at first base and DH, because why not bring in Bellinger still too? Again, if David Stearns is truly adamant on wanting guys that bring good defensive versatility, this is the way to go in my opinion. So I really, really want the Mets to land a player profile like him if they're not going to land Bellinger. I'd love for them to land both, but beggars can't be choosers, and us Mets fans have been nothing short of begging for everything and anything all off season long. So I would definitely love to hear your guys' thoughts on O here is what I'm going to go with. He steadily usually sits right around 30 home runs, north of 90 plus RBIs a season, hitting for great high contact. His handle velocity unbelievably well, and ways that Munetaka Murakami has struggled early in his career. Was the captain of the Yomiuri Giants, and the Giants posted him when he's the first position player ever posted from that club, and they're a historic club in Japan. So he's bringing leadership qualities as well, and I really think he'd be a selfless player in this organization in a great way. He was also part of Team Japan for the World Baseball Classic when they won gold over Team USA that we saw in 2023. And I'm aware of that. Heyman didn't state that the Mets are involved. I'm not saying that the Mets are heavily involved. But what do we also know about David Stearns? He's been unbelievably stealthy this offseason. So if we're being honest, the Mets landed, it would make more sense because they really haven't been connected to him much at all the entire offseason. The Mets have operated, with the exception of Steven Williams and Luke Weaver, but that was just more common sense because their quality relievers from the Yanks can handle the big market. Those are checking off every box that the Mets are looking for right now from the bullpen standpoint. So, I want to know if you guys are for or against him. Again, in his smaller sample size before being posted this year, 15 home runs, 49 RBIs, 110% better than the league average batter in baseball. 327 average, 416 on base, almost a 600 slug, and he's entering his age 30 season. So you're getting him right in his prime right now for the next number of years. I like a lot about Cosmo and what he brings to the table, but to be determined if the Mets are really going to be in his market enough or not. Having said that, though, everybody, we're going to continue on the live show now, but I'm going to cut things off for our replay viewers. So please make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on your way in and on your way out, replay viewers. I greatly appreciate that. Let me know all your thoughts on the following players that we broke down this one. To everyone watching live, we're not going anywhere. We're going to continue further player breakdowns and get into other miscellaneous topics in Metsland, and we're going to start by answering all those donations for you guys and then going on from there. But everyone watching live, let's continue smashing that like and subscribe button. Everyone watching on replay, this is where we will be cutting things off. I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas. If you haven't already, have a very Happy Hanukkah. Whatever holiday that you are spending with your friends, your loved ones, your families, or maybe just yourself, know that you're appreciated for watching this content, being a follower on the platform, whether you're new or reoccurring. I greatly appreciate every single one of you guys. Hope you guys have a very blessed holiday season. Let's continue on the live show. People on replay, this is where we're going to end it.